Hi, listeners. Chrissie here. You may notice that I'm a bit quiet during this interview, and that's because the internet gods decided to play some tricks on me and kept dropping my signal. It's a great interview. Enjoy listening. I just wanted to let you know that I wasn't being antisocial.
UFP, the United Federation of Podcasts.
Infinite diversity.
Live long and prosper, and welcome to Infinite Diversity, a Star Trek Universe podcast here on the United Federation of Podcast Network. I'm your host for today, Justin, and joining me are my co-hosts, Chrissie and Brandon. Brandon, I'm so glad you could join us. We weren't sure last time if you could, but how have you been? I'm sorry that I was expecting that to sound like the ocean. But what are you going for there?
I'm trying to communicate with you in my own special way, my own special Canadian way.
Okay. Maybe that's what Canadian water sounds like. Anyway, good to have you here. Sorry, listeners, I'm going into what we're talking about today. But Chrissie, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Just trying to figure out the mysteries of the universe and move people onto a new planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always a good thing. And listeners, we'll get to what we're talking about. But before we jump into our topic for today, we'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon patrons who make our show possible. And listeners, if you'd like to join me as an associate producer of the show and have your name read right here at the beginning of every show, you can do that with your monthly subscription of just $10 a month at patreon.com/UFPEarth. So thank you for doing that if you're going to do that, or if you're just listening, it's great. We appreciate you being here. So we did have an episode all about news last week, and this week we are joined with a special guest. It's author Cassandra Rose Clarke. So welcome back to Infinite Diversity, Cassandra.
Hello, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and I say welcome back because you were here back in August on episode 6 talking about a Lower Decks episode, Temporal Edicts. So that was a lot of fun having you there, and you teased a little bit about this new novel that we'll be talking about today, so it's great to have you back so we can now actually talk about that book.
Okay, now we got to pause on that because you just said back on August 6th, but as the release of this is August 10th. That was a year ago.
Oh, yeah, that was a year ago. Jeez. So yes, I meant back in August of 2020, we talked to you about Lower Decks on episode 6. Yes. But I know it's been almost a year since we've had you here. Wow. Amazing. Okay. So Cassandra, we're here to talk about your new TNG novel, which is called Shadows Have Offended, which I was very excited. This takes place during the series, which we haven't gotten much of lately. But tell us a little bit about how the novel came about.
So I was actually invited to write it. The editor who does the Star Trek books, he had read one of my Halo novels. I wrote a couple of Halo novels, and he enjoyed them. And I was at a Halo convention, and he came up to me and he was like, "So do you like TNG?" And I was like, "Do I like TNG? Yes, I do." And so he told me that they were looking to perhaps add some books to the roster that were just sort of standalone adventures, which I was really excited about.
Nice.
So I, of course, jumped on the chance because it's sort of a dream to write a Star Trek novel. It was something I never thought would actually happen. So I was really excited, especially a TNG novel.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, yeah.
So tell us how the novel came about. So, this takes place at the end of season 7. Was this your idea, or did they say this is where we want to place it? Are you particularly fascinated with Troy and Worf together? Is that why it was set here?
So they told me they wanted to have something sort of in the later seasons, and so that was why we went with season 7. The Troy and Worf stuff, I've always liked that pairing. I know it's not very popular.
I do too. I like it a lot.
But I always like those two together.
I know not everyone agrees with us, Cassandra.
You're both
but
monsters.
We're
I know.
But so I was just like, well, if it's in season 7, then this is my chance to write about this pairing that I love so much. So I knew I definitely wanted to explore that. So that was, again, it sort of worked out that they wanted something in the later seasons, because then I got to kind of play around with that. And then you also get to sort of play around with their personalities in the later seasons, because the characters do evolve a bit, particularly Worf. So that was fun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how'd you come up with the story? What's the origin of the story? And then how much did that shift as you were writing?
Okay. Yeah. So they gave me sort of freedom to come up with whatever I wanted.
Nice.
Within those constraints, which is cool, but also was like sort of intimidating, because I was like, man, I can do anything I want. Mm-hmm. And what do I do? It was like the tyranny of choice. So I came up with a couple of different suggestions, and this was the one that they settled on. And one of my things when I'm trying to figure out a plot is I tend to go to like disease outbreaks, and unfortunately this was also the very start of the pandemic when I was out like this. But it wasn't, but like that's just sort of my go-to, like, oh, I need something to drive the plot, let's do an outbreak of a mysterious virus. And so that was where the Crusher storyline came from, was me just sort of like, okay, I want there to be some, because I knew I wanted to write about Crusher. I knew going in I wanted to write about Troy and Crusher, and sort of focus on them as characters. So I was like, well, that would make sense for her to be investigating a mysterious illness. Although, of course, it turns out to be a little more complicated than that. But I don't know how spoiler.
We'll get into spoilers a little later.
But that was sort of the seed of the idea, was to just sort of have this mysterious illness and then have them sort of solve that mystery. But that alone wasn't enough for one book, so I sort of needed, kind of the subplot. And I've always loved Lexana Troy. Another unpopular opinion.
I do too.
I don't care. And so I wanted to kind of bring her in, and I've always loved the Betazoids, and I thought it would be fun to sort of explore Betazoid culture a little bit. And so that plot with the objects, the sacred objects and everything, and the heist plot, that sort of grew out of my desire to write a bit about Lexana and the Betazoids, and just kind of thinking, what would the Betazoids want to do? And in terms of how it changed, I definitely got a lot of feedback from the editors. So they really helped me. Like, I kind of gave my idea, and they sort of helped me shape it to fit sort of Star Trek canon, which I thought was very helpful. So the core ideas stayed the same, but we sort of tweaked it a bit to get it to be a little more Star Trek-y.
So actually, Cassandra, before we get a little deeper into some of the plots, I just have a side thing that I made a note of and wanted to ask you about, because you said you like stories that have to do with diseases. And I was just curious, because I know you've read some of the novels, especially like that came out during this series. Have you read Double Helix? It's basically like 6 books about a disease outbreak.
No, I haven't. I haven't really read any of like the longer series.
Okay,
but yeah, I'll have to check that out.
if you like that kind of thing, seriously, it's like 6 books of that. I really enjoy it, and I read it way before the pandemic, and maybe it would be harder now. But anyway, just a little side note, maybe something you'd like to look into.
I want to add there,
sure.
one of I really liked. So I love Lwaxana Troy. I think Lwaxana Troy is a great character. I've always loved her, and I've got some interesting thoughts about her and Picard. But what I liked that you brought to it was, with this being on Beta Z, and they've our major exposure to the Betazoid culture has been through the Troy family. And we always hear about the heir to the Holy Rings of Beta Z, daughter of the 5th house and stuff. And I loved how you brought in some of the other houses. And, we hear about these the Holy Rings, and it's an interesting idea that all these other houses might have some kind of unique item that's a part of that family's history, that house's history. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of those things. A lot of the sort of Betazoid or Beta Z cultural like world building, I sort of just came up with. And I was kind of half expecting them to be like, you can't do this. We kind of know what's going on. But they let me do it. So I was like, awesome. But yeah, I liked the idea of there being more Lwaxana Troys. Like, I kind of like the idea that she's sort of typical of betazoids, and that they have this sort of aristocracy, which is always something that I thought was interesting because it seems so counter to Star Trek. Star Trek seems very anti-aristocracy, just in its sort of worldview. And it was interesting to me that you had this culture that's part of the Federation that has these sort of these great houses and, you know, these sort of important people, and the way Lwaxana would always present herself as being like, I'm the daughter of the 5th house of Beta Z, so forth. So I wanted to kind of explore, you know, what that would look like in the Federation. So that's where that kind of came from, and sort of really tying it to sort of their history and it being very much about them celebrating their culture and celebrating their history, and how that would kind of play out as sort of these just like really elaborate cultural festivals and things, which TNG always seems very fond of.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that part of the story, because I love Lwaxana, I love Deanna, and whatever betazoids we see. We don't actually see a whole lot outside of the Troi family on screen. So what I really liked was that you get to go to Beta Z and see, you know, all of these different people and the functions they have and the families, and get to learn about the history and the culture and these sacred artifacts and all of that. I really love that. So, but I mean, I guess in this part of the story, there's going to be this celebration because there are some artifacts that are together for the first time in 500 years. So there are dignitaries coming from all over. And I really liked, you know, seeing all those people together, and, you know, the Enterprise is there transporting some people and all of that. So, and I think it was great just to, again, fill out some culture and history for Beta Z. So again, without getting into too many spoilers, did you have like a specific inspiration for kind of how you built out the history and the culture and some of the things that we see about Beta Z here?
Not really. Like, there's nothing I could specifically point to, other than maybe just like fantasy, like general fantasy novels that often have those kind of cultures. And then I was also, part of me was trying to make it not as over the top as I could, but like a little over the top, because I feel like the betazoids are sort of, they're a little over the top.
Just a little.
You know, and Lwaxana can be like that. And so I thought, let's just make them all like that. So I was trying to just sort of have fun with it, but also keep it grounded. So I was like, what would be like a reasonable story that they would celebrate and all of that. But then how would it kind of change over time and become sort of mythic? So that was sort of where I was pulling from, I guess, was sort of the way we have these cultural stories. Like, all cultures have them, and just sort of like the Arthurian legend in Western culture, and how that might be based in reality, but how has it become this sort of fantastical story? So that was sort of where the inspiration came from.
Okay. So I think at this point, because I think we want to get deeper into it, I think we should give our listeners a spoiler warning. So listeners, if you haven't read Shadows Have Offended, go ahead and read it. I really enjoyed it.
I want to add one thing there that she said. So talking about the betazoid culture and them being over the top, I mean, like, I think that's a very appropriate, because while Lwaxana has been our primary look into it, like Deanna Troi herself, I don't think gave us a lot of look into the betazoid culture. I think our most of our look came from Lwaxana herself. We had the guy in Tin Man, I can't remember his name right now, and he was an interesting character because
Tam Elbrum.
What is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tam Elbrum.
He was interesting because he developed his powers early, and so like that kind of messed him up psychologically because he didn't quite know how to deal with it at a young age. But I've always interpreted that the betazoid culture would be very similar to the way that Lwaxana is portrayed on screen, because they don't have any taboos, they don't have any barriers, they don't have any things that they don't talk about and touch on, because they can read each other's minds. And while they say that they don't read each other's minds, I'm sure that they kind of do. Like, there's certain things that people are going to give off that they just naturally absorb. right? They naturally sense, they naturally read people's minds in a little bit of a way. So this is just what I've assumed they are when they're talking, because there's no barriers here. So I'm just going to say what I think, because what's the point in lying? Yeah, we can lie in diplomacy if we need to, but what's the point in lying in general conversation? Because you're going to know if I'm lying or not anyways. And so that would just translate over when they're speaking with non-telepaths, right? And so, like, from my point of view, for the history of the relationship between Troy and Picard, I think that the thing that Lwaxana is talking about all the time is actually true. I honestly think that Picard actually has these feelings for Lwaxana, and he's embarrassed because, remember, Picard is a very private man. He doesn't want his dirty laundry aired out there, and so here comes Lwaxana with no inhibitions, and she's just like, Jean-Luc, oh, those dirty thoughts of yours. And, like, Jean-Luc is trying to maintain that facade in front of his crew, and so his interpretation of how he maintains that is irritation and whatnot. And I think he's irritated with the fact that she just blurts this stuff out. But honestly, my impression has always been that I mean, she's a telepath. She's reading his mind. This is what Picard is thinking. I don't know. So,
oh, that's interesting, because I've often seen it as she's exaggerating that in order to flirt with him or something. But yeah. But anyway,
that's an interesting thing. Go ahead.
I like that theory. And I could totally see it. I could totally buy it. Honestly.
There is a logic to that in terms of negotiating things as an ambassador and dealing with things, because if she can put somebody on what's the word I'm looking for? Make somebody uneasy because she starts saying things that either they're thinking or they know that they're not thinking. So she's creating a situation where something appears to be that is not. Then that allows her to, I don't want to use the word manipulate the situation, but we'll say manipulate the situation. And maybe the other person lets out some information that they didn't mean to. So I could see it either way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you mentioned Troy as an ambassador. And one of the things that I really liked in the novel is that, yes, Lwaxana can be kind of over the top, like, oh, it's so great to see you, Jean-Luc, and like all this stuff. But you see as the plot goes, and again, I'd given the spoiler warning, so I'll get into spoilers. So you have these treasures, they're unveiled, they're stolen, and so they have to kind of see what's happening. And for a lot of the Betazoids, they're just kind of shocked and offended and can't believe this would happen, and they're just kind of panicked about all of this. And Lwaxana is really good, I think, about trying to calm them, trying to take control of the situation, trying to kind of talk to all the people from the different cultures that are there and that have to, like they're locked down this theater where this is taking place and they really want to go. And I think she's really great. And this, I think, novel, more than I've seen before, really shows why she's an ambassador and why she's good at that. But I'm wondering just like how you approached, showing her as an ambassador and not just as someone that's kind of over the top and irritates Picard.
Right. Well, I knew. So I've always thought it was interesting that they made her an ambassador in the show. And especially in TNG, I feel like you never see her do anything like very ambassador.
Not so much, yeah.
I feel like DS9, they fixed that a little bit. But I wanted to see her be an ambassador, and I wanted her to be good at her job, because I feel like she would be, kind of for the reasons you were saying, like she's a psychic, so she's able to see what people are thinking. So of course, like a telepath is going to be the best ambassador. And I thought, I feel like I was trying to show her as like her kind of over the topness and her flirting with Picard. She knows what she's doing and she just doesn't care, because she's so just blunt, because again, that's how I'm sort of imagining the Betazoids is like, they're just going to say what's on their mind, because why wouldn't they? So I wanted to kind of show her be Lwaxana and be kind of over the top and like flirting and swishing around in her ball gowns. I always like costumes. So I had to get those things. But also when it comes to it and she has to meet with the ambassador to for the Romulans, she does a good job. Like she kind of sits down and she does what she needs to do. And it was really important to me to kind of show that, because I thought, we don't really see her being an ambassador. And I said this on the other podcast that I was on, that just came out. I would read a book that's just her being an ambassador and just doing ambassador stuff, like negotiating and like, solving some kind of, there's some like imminent conflict and she like solves it with her ambassador skills, because I just think she's such an interesting character to have her be so flirty and to us seems so inappropriate, but then to have her in this position where there's going to be a lot of delicacy, and that when she needs to, she can do it. She just doesn't usually need to do it.
Yeah, like if there's a certain situation and she's dealing with a culture that she knows the way she usually is would be offensive, then she would adjust and be like, okay, this is what this situation requires. Right. I would love to see that. Yeah.
There you go, Simon and Schuster.
Star Trek Ambassador Troy.
Why not? If we can have one that is the life of Sarek, then why not?
Yeah, I would totally go for that. So in this plot line, these artifacts are stolen and they have to kind of go and figure out what's going on. Picard, to his irritation, has to stay on Beta Z, while Worf and Deanna and the Enterprise kind of go off elsewhere to figure out what's going on. But I'm kind of maybe I won't jump so far ahead yet, but I think it's interesting if we stay on Troy, Lwaxana Troy. How Picard, is showing his kind of irritation at Lwaxana. And I think at a certain point, Deanna is saying like he's been through worse, and Picard said, "Yes, I was stabbed through the heart and nearly died," which I thought was hilarious. I thought there were a lot of funny parts in this. So like, was it just like a conscious choice to have some humor in this part and to kind of play off of that kind of situation?
Definitely. And I think that even in the show, the Picard and Lwaxana interactions are pretty funny. And kind of definitely lend some levity. And so I was sort of just trying to capture that feel, especially since the other storyline was a lot more serious. So this was kind of the lighter one. Yeah.
So in this part of the story, they do an investigation and they find that it seems like this Romulan is behind the theft of these artifacts. But then really there's kind of some Ferengi behind it, including a female Ferengi named Britt the Baron, which I think is a lot of fun and feels like a call forward to Pell in DS9.
Call backwards, because this would actually be after Rules of Acquisition, right? So Rules of Acquisition right at the start of the second season, right? I love that because it's building upon Pell. So I think Pell went back to Ferenginar and like continued to do stuff. I don't know. I love that. I thought that was fantastic.
Okay. I hadn't
she
thought about that.
She could have been one of the other Bryn the Barons.
Yeah.
Or
she's above Bryn the Baron, right? Like she's like the top of the pyramid, right?
Yeah. But I was just curious for the choice that, there's Ferengi involved here and there's a Romulan involved here, because I think there's a lot of different places that it could have gone, different species or different people that could have stolen this for their own reasons. How did you come up with, okay, there's this Romulan, but behind that there's, this group of Ferengi? Like, how'd that come about?
So I actually love that episode, Rules of Acquisition, because I love the idea of the Ferengi women, or the female Ferengis. They're protesting against their oppression by being better capitalists than the men, and I just think that's so I wanted to have that in there. I wanted to kind of have that reference to Rules of Acquisition and to Pell, and to this idea that there was this like network of females who were earning profit, but I wanted to try to make the plot as twisty as I could. So I was thinking, well, Romulans are like a good like standard bad guy in Star Trek, and I like the idea that they're the Romulans, and so they think, oh my gosh, it's going to be this big war. What's going on? Why would they do this? And then to have it turn out to be something completely different. That's not that's just almost kind of silly. You know, it's just about making money or whatever. So that was where that kind of came from. Was I like the idea of it feeling like it was going to be this really serious, dramatic thing, and then you find out, oh no, there's this actually other thing going on that's kind of cool, and that we can actually we can sort this out without going to war. So that's kind of where it was coming from. I always wanted it to be Ferengi, but I wanted there to be some twists and turns as they try to figure out what's happening.
Totally thought that Vulcan aide, that woman Vulcan aide, was going to turn out to be a Romulan.
Really?
Yeah, me
Right,
too.
so-
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I didn't
So I was
think-
about
I didn't
to
think that at
compliment
all.
you on your misdirection.
Sorry for interrupting, Chrissie.
So-
there, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh no, that's all right. It's
Sorry
great
about
minds.
that. She was
right?
supposed to be the red herring. I wanted her to be.
Really?
I fell for
Well,
it.
especially
Which
because
I must-
I stole that from Picard, but
oh, that's all right.
I totally
Yeah.
fell for it because
The-
I messaged in our message group. When I got to chapter 18, I picked it up and read it, and I messaged them, and I'm like, I think I know who's behind the theft, and I thought it was going to be the Vulcan, because you kept these little smiles that she kept doing, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, she's a Romulan, dirty Romulan.
Wow, I must be really dense because I didn't think that like at all. For and let's talk about that because I really like that character. I think you're talking about Ambassador
yeah.
Ciel, right? I really liked her because it was like this Vulcan that just kind of like loves Betazoid culture and maybe a bit more emotional or whatever. So I was just taking it as like this is somebody who's a little bit different, which is great. I actually want to read out something that she says because I really liked it. And she said, Vulcans have our share of ceremony, but nothing can compare with the ceremonies of Beta Z. They are so imbued with emotion. I believe it is where they get their power from. And Picard says, forgive me, but it's surprising to hear a Vulcan say so. And then Ciel says, my people could learn from the Betazoids. Their telepathy makes their emotions a strength, not a weakness. The art and music of this world, it's like unlike anything else. Don't you agree? So I just liked it as kind of this Vulcan character that's a little bit different than the stereotype. And I totally didn't think she was behind anything. So I missed
That's
that.
all right.
But I really liked that character.
I noted all of what you just read there, and I wrote next to it "True Idic," and so that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot.
So good job on the red herring.
Yeah.
Well, you got 2 out of 3, so that's pretty
And as
good.
Meatloaf says,
Although for me, like,
yeah.
yeah. Although for me, like, I was just kind of along for the ride. I wasn't guessing. I was just like somebody, and I'll just find out. I didn't believe that it was, this Betazoid. What is it, Aviana Verox? I didn't think that it was her, but I was like, I don't know who it is. Let's talk about another aspect that you touched upon before, which is Troy and Worf, which, yes, it's not everybody's favorite relationship. But I do like the way that you handled here because it's small bits here and there. It's not like they're like, I love you so much and like all this stuff. It's just like little, touches and looks and things like that. And I felt it was handled like in a way that like someone like me that really likes the relationship can appreciate it. But if you don't like it, you're just like, not a big deal. So was that just like a conscious thing that you wanted it to just be kind of a little more subtle?
It was more that I was trying to figure out how their relationship would look when they are on duty, basically, because it's like they're not going to be hanging off of each other. I mean, not that they would be doing that anyway, but there were even in the show, their relationship felt very much like a courtship, like what we see of it in the show, because Worf is so. I don't know. He's so Worf. Like he can be very formal, and I could see him not wanting to overstep bounds or anything like that. So that was sort of the inspiration I had for it. I wasn't really thinking so much about people who don't like the relationship because I like it. So I was like, too bad.
That's the right attitude. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking, well, what would they be doing if they're technically on duty or they're in uniform? So that was kind of why I kind of pulled it back, was more for that reason. But I also didn't think that's how their relationship would be. It would be kind of a subtle. It wasn't like the fiery, passionate relationship that she had with Riker.
Well, for me, this really worked. Like, well, I don't particularly like the relationship itself. I mean, the way you've written it was I think appropriate, because these are two people that have worked together for 7 years. And this relationship kind of just came out of nowhere, right? In the show, like we had it in a parallel dimension, and then on the show, they're all of a sudden kind of dating and kissing right at the start of All Good Things.
Oh, there's more to it than that. Going back to season 5, but we can talk about that another time.
but anyways, like, it does kind of come out of nowhere. So I don't think it's something that they ever really considered too much, and so they're kind of just dipping their toes in the water, and they're like figuring it out as they go. That's how I felt the way that you wrote this, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was well written for what we got out of season 7 of their relationship.
Yeah, and I was definitely imagining them as kind of trying to figure it out. Like, it was, I always sort of read that relationship as the attraction had been there, just because of all the stuff with Alexander, but they didn't really.
Yes, and that's why it goes back to season 5 with ethics. when Deanna is willing to take care of Alexander when it looks like.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're romantic.
Anyway.
Yeah, that was how I always.
It means that there's a deeper friendship. Okay, we'll argue about it later.
I always kind of thought that the seeing it in the alternate universe sort of made them like, well, maybe they made them acknowledge those feelings. So it was always, to me, as them like sort of, do we want to do this? What do we want to do? Like, how is this going to work? And so that was sort of where I was coming from when I wrote that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that makes sense, because the way I see parallels is like Worf is in multiple universes where he and Troy are together and married and all this. And after that, it's probably like, well, you know, maybe there's something to it. Maybe we should. That's how I see it. Yeah. They're like, let's try and see what happens. It's not like love at first sight or whatever, but like, let's try and see what happens. And eventually it doesn't work out, which I think, I love the relationship, but it makes sense why it wouldn't work out in the end. But yeah, anyway, just to appreciate how you wrote that. Do we have any other questions on kind of the Beta Z kind of portion of the story?
I don't know if you might have talked about this when my internet died, but
okay.
I just wanted to say I love the ostentatiousness of the clothing. Okay, and the description of the headdress with the birdcage. Okay, it immediately takes me to pre-revolutionary France, and I didn't know if that was what you intended, but I've read historical accounts of that kind of crazy hairdressing, and so that was really cool.
Yeah, I was definitely inspired by sort of revolutionary France and the sort of historical clothing that I had seen, because I love fashion, and like I said, that was one of the reasons I always liked Lwaxana, because I always thought she had the best clothes.
Yeah.
Her clothes are fun. Yeah.
I guess the last thing on that one is I thought it was an interesting plot to have the theft take place on Beta Z, which is a planet full of telepaths, right? And so the first thing is, how are you going to pull this off? And people aren't going to sense that you're about to steal something, right? So, yeah, I thought that was really good.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about the other half of the story. So, in the meantime, while this stuff is taking place on Beta Z, and then they're just trying to go off and chase and see what happens, the way that the other part with Dr. Crusher starts off is, I think, you know, there's going to be kind of this routine kind of scientific survey on a planet that's being made available for some refugees, and Crusher's like, I need something like that's just routine and nothing big's going to happen. But of course, being what it is, something does happen. So I really like this part of the story as well, because I felt like there was like where the plot that had to do with Beta Z was just like kind of, okay, we've got this joyous celebration. Oh no, something's going wrong. And it's just kind of fun following it along. There was a very like kind of creepy, ominous vibe in this other half of the story, because all of a sudden it seems like people are, you know, mysteriously falling ill where they hadn't before, but then they're getting better when they're beamed up, and there's just like, and it's affecting technology and it's affecting data, and like that felt like really mysterious. So I think that really came through, that this was just kind of like a really like odd, ominous thing, and there'd be times where it seemed like something was happening but actually it wasn't happening, or it was a dream or whatever. So was that like a conscious choice that like there is this serious thing and it's going to feel really ominous?
Yeah, that whole section I was kind of writing almost like a horror story. I was trying to get it sort of like a horror story vibe, or sort of even almost like a cosmic horror type thing. Star Trek. I mean, cosmic horror in Star Trek is obviously going to feel quite different than it is in like Lovecraft or whatever.
Just a little
bit.
But I wanted that sort of creepy reality is kind of unstable vibe. And so, yeah, that was definitely conscious. I wanted it to feel almost like a horror, but like a horror story. And then it was such a contrast to the other plot line. I was like, I hope I can kind of weave these together so it doesn't feel like whiplash. But yeah.
Well, the way that I felt about it, because it's taking place during the series, the way I felt about it is, okay, this is like a TNG episode, A plot, B plot. Yep. They don't necessarily have to like all intermingle. So that worked fine for me. It didn't have to be like there was some like, crazy relationship between them.
Right.
It was just like, this is a separate thing, and that's fine. And they did feel like very different stories, and it feels like Crusher's going through something very different than Troy. I mean, Crusher, I think, is getting very frustrated. Like, what is going on here? I have no idea what's happening. But I thought it was really well described, because I could almost like picture this beach that they keep coming back to and trying to figure out like what the heck is going on. I want to mention something else that I thought was interesting that I don't know if we really see much in Star Trek in the 24th century, at least. So they have like this kind of building where they're doing this research, and it's like a biomass building that can just kind of like collapse and stuff. Like, I was just kind of curious about that idea and where that came from.
Yeah, that was another one of those things where I wasn't sure if they would let me do it. But I just had that idea because I was trying to imagine how, if you're going to set up a science station on a planet, you're not going to want it to stay there. That was kind of my thinking, was like, you're going to want it to go away. And especially, I mean, in that case, they were gonna have people move on to the planet, so I guess it wouldn't really matter. But I was thinking, if they were in situations where they're studying something and they need to have a station, but they don't want it to stay there, they want it to sort of leave no trace. That was sort of my thinking. And so that was where I sort of came up with that idea. And then I, of course, had to do like technobabble type stuff to explain it. I was like, I don't really know how this would work, but whatever. But yeah, that was kind of the idea for that. And I thought it was just kind of a cool science fiction-y thing. Since I've written a lot of like my own science fiction novels, that was definitely sort of my original idea. But it just seemed like something that would fit in Star Trek, so I ran with it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I thought it was a really cool idea, and I say not something like that in the 24th century. I think maybe it's a bit like what you see in Discovery season 3, where they have this programmable matter and stuff just kind of like appears and disappears that they're doing. But yeah, anyway, I really liked that. I liked kind of the whole vibe of it and what was going on and trying to figure out what was there.
Right.
And I did really like that Crusher is the focus, which doesn't happen quite enough that it needs to. So.
Yeah, I like the aspect of this here, that it's like a communication thing, and that Crusher was the one to figure it out what was going on, right? Because as Justin just said, we don't get enough with Beverly Crusher throughout the run of the show. We get a couple episodes here and there, but out of 7 seasons, I think she's probably the character that we got the least amount of development for, not including the one that she was gone. So right. I guess 6 seasons there, but she's
Yeah.
more than just a doctor. I mean, she's part engineer because she's always working on Data as well, right? So she acknowledges her limitations in this book when Data has his issues, but she's working on him, and she's also figuring out and seeing a pattern in this problem that's going on. It's not Riker that figures it out; it's Troy that figures it, or it's Crusher that figures it out, right? So I thought that was a great story to give to Crusher because it utilizes her talents. She's a full commander, right? So she's got leading ability.
Yes.
So yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah. And I do really like how she does take command in certain situations, because I think they don't know what's going on, and Crusher wants to quarantine, and Riker's outside, and he's like, hey, what's going on? Can I come in? She's like, don't come in. Don't do anything, because this is really going to be bad. And I thought that was interesting that, Riker's the first officer, so he's technically, ranked higher, but Crusher... I mean, as the chief medical officer as well, she can overrule others in medical matters and stuff like that. But anyway, I really like that she was really kind of taking command of things, but also acknowledging, like, I don't really know quite what's going on here.
And there was aspects of like kind of COVID going on with this too, right? Where it's like, we quarantine. And we know something's wrong. We can't figure it out, right? We don't know how this is going to pass, how this is contagious or not, and so yeah.
Yeah. Although at a certain point, Riker does convince her, like, oh, you found nothing wrong, so, break the quarantine. I'm like, no, don't do that. That's not going to be good, right? And if with our experience with COVID, we're just like, just because it seems like things are okay doesn't mean it's really okay. So,
yeah, I was going to say, this is definitely a COVID book because I was writing it during, like, the entirety of the early part of the pandemic. So, like I started outlining it right as things were starting. And so its entire creation was definitely influenced by COVID, which is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Like I said, the fact that it was a virus was incidental. That was just my go-to. And then we wound up being in a global pandemic. And I was like, well, okay. So it was kind of a weird synchronicity, I guess.
Yeah. So I want to talk at this point about what we find out about what's really going on. And it's very much a classic Star Trek thing where there are these creatures that have been there. They've just been trying to communicate. And I think what happens is they didn't try before because there were just a few people that were there before the away team came, and they just didn't think that it was something that was alive. But now there are these more people, and then there's this technology, and they're trying to communicate and to understand, and they're kind of inadvertently having all of these problems. So I just wanted you to kind of talk a little bit about that and how that came about.
Well, I always love those episodes in Star Trek that are about communication. Like the Darmok and Jalad is one of my favorite episodes. I mean, I was an English teacher, and I literally showed that to my English class. I love it. So. Yeah. So I've just always loved those kinds of episodes that are about communication. And I also love stories about aliens that are very unhuman or very, very different. And so that was kind of what I wanted to do with that, was to sort of show what happens when you encounter these beings that their way of thinking is so different from the crew's. That you just have this clash. And so it feels like something sinister is happening, but it's really just they're trying to say hello. That's all they're trying to do. And since this is Star Trek, and it's one of the things I love about Star Trek, it ends up wholesome. Like they end up talking to each other. They find a way to communicate. It doesn't end up with this like tragedy. And so that was really the inspiration there, was just exploring those ideas, which I think are very classic Star Trek ideas of how do we communicate. And I know it kind of is an artifact of trying to get around the communication, the universal translator, but you wind up creating these really fascinating stories about language and about communication and about culture.
But I really like the ones where the universal translator doesn't know exactly what to do, because I think that's realistic. It's not going to know everything, all the possibilities out there. It's going to encounter something where it's like, I don't know what to do with this. Although hopefully after this, they figured out some way so they can really translate with these creatures. But I thought it was really interesting as well that for these creatures, at first they kind of registered as fossilized. So it's like, that's not alive. But I guess there was just kind of like a limitation with what they could detect for these creatures, right?
Yeah, that was my thinking, was that they're so unusual that their technology doesn't read them correctly. And it's sort of like the thing with the universal translator and how if it hasn't encountered something before, it's going to try to interpret that data, but it's not necessarily going to interpret it correctly. And so one of the things I was trying to get across with the creatures is that they see anything that's isolated as being dead, because when they're isolated, they're dead, they're fossilized. And so that was sort of why they read that way. And then that was also why they didn't communicate with the teams that were there before, because there were just too few of them. And it wasn't until there were more that they were like, oh, these things are alive. We should try to talk to them. And so I was kind of trying to have that interplay with that.
That ended up a beautiful commentary on what was going on during the pandemic. The isolation can kill you, even though it's, protecting you. So I like that.
Like I said, this definitely wound up being a COVID book without explicitly about COVID.
A very random question having to do with that whole mystery on the alien planet. There's the scene where they're looking at they look like they're dead, but they're not. No blood pressure, body temperature of 11 degrees. Immediately that brought to mind Return of the Living Dead. Have you seen that movie? Do you know what I'm talking about?
If I have, it was like years ago.
I'm not a zombie movie person, but that's one of my husband's favorite movies. And there's long story short, there's a zombie virus or whatever that's out in the air, and two of the characters end up basically becoming zombies while they're still alive, and they think they're sick, and they call EMTs, and the EMTs come in, and they're like, "You have no blood pressure, and you're below body temperature. You should be dead." And they're standing there talking to them. So that was what I thought, and I love it. It was great.
Yeah,
I was just trying to go for maximum creepiness.
It did. Yeah. It did, for sure.
I don't have a question on that part, but I did have a question for you on the title of the book. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the title, because it's a very interesting title, and I'm just wondering, what does it relate to you for this book here?
So I was definitely thinking of it as being a reference to the creatures on the beach, because what I was thinking was, because the original line is talking about dreams, like is the idea that, you know, these things you've seen, they're just if they offended you, if they bothered you, they were just dreams. And so
very appropriately for Star Trek, a Shakespeare.
I was about to say Midsummer Night's Dream. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I was brainstorming all kinds of titles, and the editor was like, "Why don't you go for some Shakespeare quotes?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a former English teacher. I can do Shakespeare quotes." But that one, I felt like that one just fit because of the idea of dreams being real, right? Because that's kind of what it's getting at. I mean, Puck is basically, in the play, Puck is saying, "Oh, if you thought this stuff bothered you, then it wasn't real, it was just a dream," but it was real in the play. So I like that idea of like, well, these shadows have offended. They're not actually just dreams. They're, you know, it's real, it's reality, but they weren't trying to be offensive. So that was kind of why I pulled that one. And I've always liked Midsummer Night's Dream anyway, and that line.
Yeah, that's great. And like, as it happened, as I was reading this book, and there were these dreams that were going on, you weren't sure like what was real and what wasn't. I was watching a Voyager episode, Waking Moments, which is basically about these aliens that contact the crew, and they're sleeping and dreaming like the whole time, and they're trying to get into the waking world, or pull beings that are in the waking world like into their dream world so they can control them. And I was like, this is weird. This is happening at the same time I'm watching this episode. But it felt very much like that. Like they're at a certain point, they're just not sure like what is going on, what's real and what isn't. Yeah.
Interesting, because like on top of that there, when we started this discussion today, you said you started with the plot of Crusher, right? And the virus and whatnot, and you've based your title on that portion of it. And that's kind of why I was asking about the title, because I know you didn't have yourself any input on this, but if we look at the cover of the novel, we've got Worf and Romulan ships on this. So picking up the book, my interpretation of it is the A-plot is the Beta Z story, right? And I'm also curious as to why they put Worf on it when it's...
Worf's face sells books, I
instead
guess.
of Crusher and Troy.
Which is a shame,
you know.
because... Yeah. But like, as you said, Brandon, it is not the author that has anything to do with the cover, so it's not your fault. But if there's a novel that focuses on Troy and Crusher, I'd like to see them on the cover, because it's much less often that they're on the cover of books. It has happened, but not as often.
Yeah, I definitely expected to see them on the cover. I mean, I like the cover. I like the art design.
It looks cool.
It's a really cool cover. But I was kind of like, I mean, Worf is in the book. Worf is important too. But I was like, I was pitching it as being Crusher and Troy, so I was a little surprised. But like you said, I opened my email and they're like, "Here's the cover," and I'm like, "Looks awesome." Like that's about the extent of the, you know, my interaction with the cover. Yeah. So
that's too bad.
So it happens, but we don't blame you.
I have another random total book question. Did you make a point of having any of the characters or place names be people or places or things that are relevant to you, or did you just come up with fun names?
I just come up with fun names.
That works.
My go-to for names for like science fiction fantasy names, there's a website called Rinkworks that is like a fantasy name generator, and so that
Nice.
They sort of string like consonants together, and I can go in there and program what kind of consonants I want to use, and that's where I always get my names.
That's fun,
yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't all of that though, because I have a list here of stuff that's connected to other Star Trek. But that's kind of fun that because I do think about that sometimes. Like if you're an author and you need to come up with like a name of a character or something, like how do you do it? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Just randomly generate some and be like, I think this one.
Yeah,
from the bottom.
that's basically how it works.
It's the modern version of opening the phone book and putting your finger down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have other
I don't think so. Do you want to jump into the canon connections there, Justin?
Yeah, so Cassandra, as you might know, we like to connect things to canon. So as I was reading the book, I like highlighted all the names that might be connections and then looked them up later. So here's what I came up with. You have an Aurelian in there, which is the bird-like species from the animated series episode Yesteryear. I want to see that in live action, but I don't know if we'll get that because they have like big wings. But you have a mention here of the Tansian flu, which is from the Voyager episode Parturition. I didn't recognize it at first, but you make a reference to Narendra, which is the system that Narendra 3 from yesterday's Enterprise is in. I think this one's fun. Bazit Khat, I think that's how it's spelled. So they're a member of the Federation. There was a counselor from that planet that was seen in Star Trek 4, which was fun. You mentioned a Hakaran, which is the species from the TNG episode Force of Nature. Where they have to deal with the issues with warp drive. I liked here that that Loaxana says, only a few years ago, he, meaning Picard, saved me from the clutches of a Ferengi using Shakespeare, which is from Menage a Troi, the very memeable moment with Picard doing his Shakespeare. You mentioned the Kalon system, and there's the planet that they're going to at one point, Uesta, is there, and that's from the TNG episode Half a Life, which is a great Loaxana episode. So one of the characters, maybe it's a Vulcan character, his name's Sural, and there is a reference to that in the Voyager episode Dreadnought because it's a name Samantha Wildman was considering for her child until the doctor says it was actually like a dictator in Vulcan history. Right. I don't know if that was a conscious choice. But...
That one wasn't.
Okay.
But that one wasn't. Yeah.
That wasn't. It just so happened that it was a Vulcan name elsewhere. I do like we see the Ferengi energy whips, like you see in the Last Outpost and in the Enterprise episode Acquisition. You don't see that much with Ferengi. Crusher does mention Kaldos, where she grew up, and where there's the lovely episode Sub Rosa. And I did like, and this is truly a call forward, where Britt is saying someday there will be a Grand Nagus who will change everything, which is for Rom, who later becomes Grand Nagus. So anyway, I really liked you put a nice number of little connections. It was fun to look up and see.
Well, I'm glad. I'll be honest, a lot of those I did research using fan wikis and stuff, like a lot of the planet names.
Oh, I had to look up a lot of these to see if it was a connection at all. There was only a couple that I knew.
So like the more obvious ones were ones that I already know, like the reference to Picard reciting Shakespeare and things. But I did with a lot of the planet names and stuff, I wanted to kind of pull from existing Star Trek lore. So I did spend a lot of time researching that. So I'm glad you guys pulled those out because most of, like I said, pretty much all those were intentional except for the Sorrel one.
Except for Sorrel, which was a weird coincidence. Did Brandon or Chrissy, do you have any other connections you picked up on?
The one that I highlighted was the Ferengi whips. I just love that they show up just randomly. It was supposed to be such a scary thing when it was first introduced, and now it's a joke, and I love it.
It wasn't.
That's why I had to get those.
Oh yeah,
I always like the whips. I feel like they should be using them more. I feel like I always wanted to have them just carry them around, like as like a, I don't know, not that they would use them, but just I can't think of the word, but
it's all right.
Try to frighten someone into making a deal with them or something. Like sign here or I'll whip you. So But Brandon, was there any other ones that you picked up as connections?
I guess just the last thing would be, just the connection to Rules of Acquisition, the episode there. So in your mind, Cassandra, where does Pell fit into this group of female Ferengi that are doing business? Because they all use this, as they said in the book, they all use the name. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's I'm bad with names. So give me the Ferengi name again here from the book here. Brit. So
Brit the Baron.
Brit the Baron is an idea, right? And it's like a group and a force that's overtaking. So while this Ferengi that we encounter has people working under them, where do you see Pell in this group of people, or is she there at all?
I actually saw her as sort of this sort of freedom fighter type figure, but in like a Ferengi way that sort of female Ferengis would hear about. So they would hear about Pell and how she was able to earn profit by dressing as a man, and that sort of she became sort of this inspiring figure. And then she's off doing her thing. Like she's kind of got her own little empire that she's doing, and that has inspired other women Ferengi. Female, I always feel weird saying female.
That's because you're not adding enough of an E sound. It's got to be like female.
Yeah. Females. They kind of heard about this and they're like, oh, we can do this too. And so she's sort of like their icon. Is sort of how I would imagine her, sort of this inspiring figure.
Love it.
To inspire others to kind of go out and sort of be sneaky and earn profit without men finding out.
I really like that. Like, I want to see what this group is doing at the time of the Picard series, and to have a novel about that,
Yeah, and I like that final twist because cool. I was still expecting that Vulcan to come back and it'd be like, so this is why I don't see him, is because it's not really a Ferengi, it's a Vulcan, right? So I don't know. Yeah. So that was a nice final twist on it too. Yeah.
So yeah. Cassandra, I've really enjoyed the novel. Thank you for coming to talk about it. We really always appreciate when authors can talk about their novels. So let our listeners know where they can find you online.
So probably the easiest way to find me is to just search for my name, Cassandra Rose Clarke. I'll be the first hit on Google. And you go to my website, you can find me online. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My Twitter handle is absolutely terrible to say out loud. CRCSEEORSEA. It's a pun on my initials. So that's why I tell people, just Google me, you'll find me. I'm around. You can.
I didn't even realize until you mentioned it on Positively Trek, where you did the interview, that it was a pun on your initials. I thought it had was a reference to some other character or book or something. Yeah, that's really cool. So, also let our listeners know if you have any current or upcoming work that you can share, whether Star Trek or not. I'm sure if it was Star Trek, you couldn't tell us, but non-Star Trek maybe.
Yeah, I do have some non-Star Trek. Star Trek fans might actually like my YA novel that came out in October called Forget This Ever Happened, which actually has a lot of similar themes as the Crusher plot in this book.
You mean there's a disease?
There's actually not a disease, but weird communication stuff. There's sort of weird, there's weird inhuman alien monster things and communication.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm already stereotyping your novels as always being about diseases.
I've got another one that does have a disease. So if you get the disease aspect, that's Star's End, which is another sort of space opera. It came out a couple years ago. So that's my most recent book. I also have a fantasy novel that'll be coming out at the start of 2022 called The Beholden, which is just sort of an adult fantasy, adventure fantasy. So you can be on the lookout for that as well.
Cool.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. Hope our listeners check those out. And again, it was really great to have you on today to talk about a new TNG novel.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Brandon, where can people find you when you're not being peachy keen, Billie Jean? We didn't talk about Data's slang usage.
Didn't think about talking about that. That's so good.
Well, I just want to make sure that you guys know that Billie Jean is not my lover. Okay, before we go too far. Okay.
Good to know.
Just a friend. Okay.
But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Brandon Matella. You can find me here on the network with a show called Franchise Fatigue, which is all about movies, remakes, and sequels. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network, as well as in our own independent feed with a show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. And we are now smack dab in the middle of our coverage of films, as well as the Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes that Hitchcock directed.
All right. And Chrissy, where can people find you when you're not doing a facepalm because Loxana has said Mr. Woof again, which she does one time in this novel.
She does right at the beginning, until she needs him to do something
It's
for
intentional.
her. And then she uses his real name. Well, Mr. Worf can take care of this, but yeah. I can't imagine what that would have been if she'd been dealing with him as a son-in-law. Or
Is
what
it,
he would have been
though-
dealing with.
Is it because she needed him, or because she found out that they were dating, that she decided to finally show him a little bit more respect? Because she does also figure out in this episode that they're dating.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, either way, it doesn't, I don't feel like it reflects well on her, because she doesn't deem to use his real name until there's a good reason in her mind. Either way,
I always feel like she's needling him a little bit, like he's a dog that barks but has no bite or something like that. That's how I've seen it.
Exactly the same as when Q asked him if he's eaten any good books lately. So, yeah.
See, it's
Poor
because
Worf.
I'll tell you why. Okay, so before you go, this is why. So I think Troy. The reason why the Troy relationship doesn't work for me is because she's too soft for Worf, in my opinion. Okay, so Worf likes a strong woman. That's why he likes Jadzia, and so Loxana knows this. She's reading his mind, and so she's provoking him and showing that she's the dominant, which is right because Worf's attracted to her too.
Yeah.
Oh boy, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
You mentioning Jadzia just went off on a weird place in my head, but yeah, given how much damage they appeared to have done to each other, I don't know that Troy would have been able to deal with that.
Loxana, or Deanna, yeah.
No, Troy, Worf and Jadzia,
yeah.
That's a whole other thing. Okay. Anyway, in addition to here on Infinite Diversity, you can find me on History with the Szilagys here on the UFP network twice a week, and I do that history podcast with my partner Jason. Happy to chat about our shows in the Federation Council Chambers on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at The Goddess Livia, that's TheGoddessLivia, where I tweet about Star Trek history and leftist politics.
All right. And depending on where Chrissy has placed that whole part where we did a tangent, it's either right after this or it's been 5 minutes. So thanks for your patience. Okay. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm at TrekFan4747, where I tweet about nothing but Star Trek. And you can find me in our Facebook group, the Federation Council Chambers. I hope you will join us there. And Brandon, we have lots of other shows, don't we?
So as I mentioned, we've got Franchise Fatigue, where Zach and I covers movies, remakes, and sequels. Amy Nelson, Patrick Devlin, and Ken Tripp have All Good Things, which covers all of the older Star Trek. Not necessarily all the old, they just cover all Star Trek. Rhea Papageorgiou, Kevin Scharf, Amy Nelson, and Joe Keegan have Galaxy Class, which is their TNG-focused podcast. And Chris Trabuzio, Patrick Devlin, and Casey Pettitt talk all things under the Disney umbrella with Mickey's Marvels. And Always Hold on Arrow, hosted by Cavante Chillis and Lance Laster, covers all things Arrow. Everything that makes Arrow, you can find it there. History with the Szilagys, with Jason and Chrissy, have a wonderful twice-weekly show, which gives you a brief dive into. Loved your guys' episode on the Black Plague that you guys recently had, because I had also...
Oh my God, yeah. No, I loved it, but at the same time, my goodness, I already knew it was a depressing period of time, but
yeah.
Lord.
See, some of that stuff that you talk about, I learned because in Ingmar Bergman's film, The Seventh Seal, takes place during, right? And there's a group of people that walk through, like halfway through the movie, and they're like whipping themselves and whipping each other and all this. And it's like, that's definitely what people did. And, you know, it's interesting stuff.
That's the Monty Python scene too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When the monks are hitting themselves in the face, that's making fun of the flagellants.
It was a very good 10-minute summary of one of the worst times and places to be alive. Oh my goodness! I mean, really, it was just,
I was surprised to find out that it might still be around here. That it's still it's
still around, but a lot less. And you can treat it with modern antibiotics, right?
Yep, you get a really heavy-duty Z-Pack and you're good to go.
Yep. And
Amazing. We just need to transport those into the past.
and then,
We just need to transport those into the past.
Yeah.
and then we've also got our cryptozoology with Ken Tripp and Zach Moore. They got a show called Sasquatch, which is a lighthearted and fun look at the cultural phenomenon of Bigfoot.
It definitely is. I every time I see somebody with one of those Bigfoot stickers on their car, I'm like, I want to take a picture of that and send it to them, as if, that's something they want.
Or you could knock on their window and
makes me
tell them
think
about
of
the
that.
podcast. That's what you should be
That's
doing.
true.
Or you can knock on their window, tell them about the podcast, do an interview, and ask Ken and Zach to air it.
I don't know if I had that kind of time, but that's it. It's made me more aware of Sasquatch-related stuff in my daily life.
Me too. Yeah. All right. So thank you for tuning into this insane podcast called Infinite Diversity. Well, we love it. It just goes off the rails in a good way. Okay. So thank you to our executive producers, Ken Tripp, Tony Robinson, and Zach Moore. Thank you to Zach Tripp for the wonderful theme music and Tony Robinson for the awesome show art. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and please subscribe. If you want to reach out, you can find the network on Twitter at UFP Earth or our show specifically at IDIC Podcast. You can also talk about any and all of the UFP podcasts in our Facebook group called the Federation Council Chambers, or you can email us at infinitediversity@ufp.earth. So on the next episode, we'll be looking ahead to Season 2 of Lower Decks. Until then, peace and long life.
This has been a production of MTMR Media Works.
Okay, so where can people find you?
Apparently speculating about Klingon sex. I don't know. All right. So in addition to here on Infinite Diversity, of course, you can find me on our... in addition to here on Infinite Diversity... No, it's okay.
I just want a show called
You're not
That's
that though. I cannot picture Deanna Troi punching and biting Worf while they're having sex. I can't picture that. That's why it doesn't work for me. Jadzia, sure, she's a tough woman. Okay, Kalar's tough.
I think Deanna's tougher than you think, and you don't know what she's like in the bedroom. Wow, we're going way off. That's real specking.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about history, where people do all sorts of things. I don't know. All right. So okay.
So on the next episode, we'll be looking ahead to Season 2 of Lower Decks. Until then, peace and long life.
Remember, Deanna Troi makes love. She doesn't fuck.
No comment.
That's supposed to be funny. Chrissy's like either frozen or she's like just disgusted with me. One of the two.